Hello, everyone, and welcome to the This Week in WWE podcast, brought to you by the American Pride Network on YouTube, our sister YouTube show, where hopefully we'll be doing a visual podcast eventually with the audio uploaded to the regular podcast. All the major podcast sites you can go to as far as Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of those, this podcast will be available. Obviously, if you're listening on that, thank you guys so much. Subscribe to our podcast. If you'd like to get our visual content, our universe modes, our farming simulators, some of the gaming stuff, and that's related around WWE and other games, go to the American Pride Network's YouTube channel and like, comment, and subscribe there. Plus, if you're missing some of the visual concepts that we will eventually have during this podcast, you'll get that fill over there. So thank you guys for joining us on the new This Week in WWE podcast, brought to you by the American Pride Network. And let's get into our episode. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to This Week in WWE. And of course, we are talking from the 23rd, which was Monday, all the way through into Wednesday night, which was NXT. Of course, this is Sunday, September 29th, that we are doing this episode, and it's almost 5 p.m. I would like to do these more and do these sooner, but however, with Smackdown being on Fridays starting this week, that's going to be kind of difficult to do. But I still want to try to do them. Will this be an every week thing? I definitely hope so. I'm not sure if it will be, though. It all depends, because I don't do this as a regular job. I do this as a hobby, and I do work other jobs. So it all depends on my schedule and whether I have time to do these every week. I'm definitely going to make a strong effort on doing them, and maybe it's something that we break up per show eventually, but I don't think that'll make for a long enough podcast. So for now, we're doing them for the whole week, and I think that'll make for, probably a 45-minute to an hour long episode. So I got some notes here that we're going to be following off of, so if you hear mouse clicks, that is why. And we're going to start, of course, with Raw. And of course, this is to explain a little bit more about this podcast, if you didn't on the intro. This is brought to you by the American Pride Network on YouTube, where all of our visual content is, and eventually, hopefully, these podcasts will be visual on there as well. It all depends on upload times. You can also check out our Twitter page, American Pride Network on Twitter. And definitely follow us on there. We update anything news like that, like whether or not if I'm able to upload or not, or whether it's audio or video podcast. That stuff will all be on there. Obviously, you can always listen on the go if you are right now, but there will be visual content eventually on the podcast. This one is straight audio, though. And this will also be uploaded on both the podcast and on YouTube, just for all of our listeners to have a variety. Not sure if there's going to be visuals. There won't be like a video, but there might be pictures. Depends on what the upload is going to take. So, because I really would like to get this podcast out tonight as I'm recording it, as Monday Night Raw starts tomorrow. So, it all depends. We'll see what we end up with. So, to kick off our Raw show is where we're going to start. And I have a bunch of notes here, and of course we'll go over that. So, starting with Raw. So, Raw kicked off this week with Seth Rollins coming out, making an announcement. Of course, Kane was put in the mandible claw by The Fiend at the end of Raw last week. So I believe so anyway. Hopefully I'm not wrong on that. That's why I write down notes when I'm going to do these. But Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman start off the show in an argument that turned into a match for the main event later on in the night. So not really much to report on this promo. Seth Rollins wasn't looking forward to fighting Braun Strowman, but it didn't look like Seth Rollins had really any say in the matter, as it was going to happen later on in the night. And there's a reason for that. We'll build up to that as we go on with these Raw notes. We then quickly moved on to the Viking Raiders versus the OC, and of course AJ Styles in the middle of the match. He was by ringside, but he was ejected after he interfered in the matchup. And on his way out, he gets jumped by Cedric Alexander, continuing that feud that they've had recently. I thought it was an excellent tag team match. Gallows and Anderson definitely looked better than they had in a long time, but ultimately the Viking Raiders picked up the win there. Yeah, so, it wasn't, a huge tag team match, but the Viking Raiders definitely look really good, and of course, they are an NXT tag team that moved their way up to the main roster. Definitely huge tag team contenders. But for a change, Gallows and Anderson actually looked pretty strong, even though the Viking Raiders picked up the win. I always thought Gallows and Anderson were kind of a wasted tag team when it came to the main roster. But hopefully the OC and AJ Styles just kind of revitalizes Gallows and Anderson's run. Definitely looking forward to see what they do in the future with that. So in between that and the next matchup, we had Becky Lynch's interview. Just kind of a standard, straightforward interview. Becky Lynch saying that she's, going to go out there and the Hell in the Cell matchup. She's never been in one before like Sasha Banks, but she's definitely looking forward to making an impact. And that's what she wants, is not only to keep Bayley out, but to keep Sasha in, was one of the comments that she made during that interview. So not much to speak of on the interview, but, pretty straightforward Becky Lynch stuff. The next matchup was Rusev versus EC3. Rusev literally rolled over EC3. And this is one thing that I really wanted to bring up in this episode, was the wasted talent in EC3. They're really not using EC3 for anything that generates any popularity for him. They literally put him in a squash match with Rusev, a guy that has so much potential. Of course, Derek Bateman was his former name when he was in the WWE. Completely wasted him then, and I would say that he probably wasn't much of a superstar at that time. However, EC3 right now could be. He went away. He made something of himself in Impact, comes back to the WWE by storm, and still doesn't get an opportunity. On NXT, he had a little bit of a run, but they moved him up to the main roster really quick, and for what? To get squashed by Rusev, to get nothing of a run. They put him as a mute there. EC3 knows how to talk, and that's the thing. They're going to waste EC3 until eventually they ship him out of the company again, and he becomes a top star somewhere else once again. Probably AEW. Will that happen anytime soon? No, because WWE is holding on to their talents really hard right now to not let them go to AEW, which is a smart business move. I thought they were going to just, lean Harper out of the mix. However, Harper's coming back and now teaming with Rowan again. I kind of like the idea of Rowan as a singles competitor, but we'll get to that later on when we get to our SmackDown portion of this podcast. But yes, EC3, definitely a wasted talent on the roster. I wish they would use him more, and I wish they would make him more of an integral part and give him some real story. I mean, the guy can talk, the guy can wrestle. Use him like it. Don't waste his talent once again. He needs this opportunity. He needs the opportunity to shine. I think if he had that opportunity with good stories behind him, he could make for a really strong character on the main roster. So next we talk about Sasha Banks versus Nicky Cross. Of course, this match, wasn't, a phenomenal match by any sorts, but it definitely wasn't one to take a back seat. I did think, however, that Sasha Banks and Nicky Cross, there was one signature spot in that match where Sasha Banks actually slammed Nicky Cross into the floor. Thought one of them was going to get hurt, definitely. But it didn't happen, I don't think. I think both of them are healthy still. Let me see what I wrote for notes here. Lots of sloppy spots in this matchup. I knew there's a couple of different things. For one thing, Nicky Cross seems to have mixed up her wrestling style a little bit, and I wasn't sure what to think of it, but there was a lot of sloppy spots with Sasha that didn't quite feel fluid in the matchup. So that was one of the things. Sasha picks up the win, moving her on, and then ends up hitting the bank statement onto Alexa Bliss to finish off that matchup and that segment of the night. Really wasn't much to report there. Sasha and Bayley, extreme heels right now with Becky Lynch, and kind of Charlotte's in the mix too. and kind of in a funny place because Charlotte's not really heel, not really face. We're not sure what she's doing right now. But definitely a decent segment on Raw. Not really huge and notable, but, it worked. We now move on to the next segment and the next match of the night, which I actually, and this is surprising, was Lacey Evans versus Ember Moon. And I actually thought that this match was better than the previous women's match with Sasha and Nikki Cross. I have a couple of theories on that. They're really strong characters first. Lacey Evans is a really strong heel. She's got that sassy Southern Belle feel, is what she's going for. It's just an awesome gimmick, really. And they still seem to have their hunger from the NXT days. Ember Moon's phenomenal talent on the main roster. And I hope that this means that they're going to get a real push. There was one specific spot in the match where Lacey completely botched the sharpshooter. Completely fell on Ember Moon when she was trying to do the sharpshooter. And, they made kind of poked fun at it a little bit. Natalya did backstage after that matchup. And, but definitely I found that Sasha and Nikki's match was a little bit more boring. Whereas Lacey Evans and Ember Moon, I was a little bit more intrigued and into that matchup just because those guys, they just put on one heck of a match. And it was just one of those things where, use the talent, use that kind of talent. They're really good in the ring. Put them to the test. I want to see more of it. I want to see more of Lacey Evans. I want to see more of Ember Moon. Put them in the title picture. I could definitely see Becky Lynch without the title now. She is a strong athlete, strong character. But I could definitely see some of these other girls picking up this title and running with that. I said girls, but I mean women. I don't want to get, shunned for that. But yeah, I could definitely see some strong character movement, some strong character development between Lacey Evans, Ember Moon, and some of the other young talent on the roster. Nikki Cross, I hope she's not getting too comfortable in the main women's scene. But I think paired with the right person, she could put on a really good match as well now. I think they need to move a little bit away from the four horsewomen. I hate to say it, but bring in some of this young talent and use them more. Like EC3. Got to move away from some of these other talent and use these other people more. Definitely they're not going to get rid of Seth Rollins. Seth Rollins is a hot ticket right now, but I'm kind of streamlining off of where I wanted to go. But yeah, definitely Lacey Evans and Ember Moon's match I thought was waves better than the other women's match, Sasha Banks and Nikki Cross. King Corbin versus Chad Gable. I got to be honest. I did not like the way the King of the Ring tournament ended. However, I do like what they're doing with Corbin's character right now. I like the new gimmick. I like the new gear. And just Baron Corbin is an awesome heel. Everybody hates him. He is an awesome heel. And Chad Gable, he's a superior athlete, and I think he does have a big future. However, I kind of see a lot of Kurt Angle in his maneuvers, in his mannerisms. And I just don't know. I think he needs to kind of figure out his own character here. Definitely phenomenal in the ring. I just think that he needs to implement some of his own personality into his character a little bit and less the Kurt Angle side. Maybe that's a gimmick they're going for right now. Maybe they want him to look like Kurt Angle for whatever reason. Maybe they're trying to build him up for a Kurt Angle match in the future. Who knows? I don't think that's going to happen, but maybe it will. And yeah, I don't know. Chad Gable looked really good in the match. King Corbin's new gimmick with all the Black King gear, I loved it. And I think definitely more to see there. And I want to see what they do with Baron Corbin from this point on. So we move on to the Fatal 5-Way Elimination match. And I thought this was a phenomenal match, really. It was Rey Mysterio versus Robert Roode versus Ricochet versus AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura. And the winner faces Seth Rollins for the Universal Championship this coming week, tomorrow night, actually. So the match starts off, huge high-flying match, high-flying maneuvers from Ricochet and Rey Mysterio. They had really good chemistry, I thought, in the match. And a couple of good and a lot of good pace in that match. It was really back and forth between everybody. And, I thought I was going to say Bobby Roode, but Robert Roode was going to pick up the win for the night. It looked like that was the way it was going. However, what really surprised me is Rey Mysterio picked up the win. He dedicated the match earlier on to his son, and it's funny because I was thinking at that moment when he dedicated the match to his son that, what if you lose this, Rey Mysterio? What if you lose this matchup? How is that going to be, dedicating it to your son? But he didn't. He won. And he gets a Universal title shot against Seth Rollins. I did not expect them to write that way. And this kind of makes me wonder if it's just going to be a throwaway match and not really an all-out, match for the Universal title. It'll surprise me. Good warm-up match for Seth Rollins. I don't know where they're going for it. I'm kind of intrigued to see. And it's kind of nice to see Rey Mysterio back in the main title scene. So, I'm definitely looking forward to see where this one goes. And, Rey Mysterio picks up the win. Seth Rollins and Rey Mysterio this week on Monday Night Raw, tomorrow night, actually, for the Universal title. Be interesting to see how that one plays out. Seth Rollins versus Braun Strowman. Of course, we talked about it in the beginning of the podcast where it kicked off with Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman having an argument, finally worked into a match. And it's funny because Seth Rollins is a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal competitor in the ring. But I thought this match was just okay. It wasn't anything that really, made me really excited to watch it. It was just an okay match. This is one of those things where Lacey Evans and Ember Moon had a much better match, I thought, than Seth Rollins and Braun Strowman, surprisingly enough. It doesn't really surprise me. I mean, Strowman is a phenomenal competitor. He's in phenomenal shape now. Seth Rollins, definitely a phenomenal competitor, but just was an okay match. It seemed like a main event, and it segued into The Fiend attacking Braun Strowman, and which kind of added a little bit more flavor to it. I mean, it made The Fiend look really strong by taking down Braun Strowman, and I figure that was pretty much all that match was for, was that final segment of The Fiend putting down Braun Strowman. Other than that, I just thought the match was okay. So that kind of wraps up our Raw notes on the night. I'm not going to give like a rating on the show. It's funny because before I started doing these, and what really got me into doing the podcast was watching the previous week's rundown of shows when NXT finally came to the USA Network, and watching those kind of revitalized me wanting to watch the WWE again more routinely, and just didn't feel like Raw really hit the mark. And I don't think it was a bad show. I just don't think it really hit the mark for me. I think they had really good writing last week, and it's going to be interesting to see what the season premiere brings tomorrow night. But yeah, Raw just was okay. It wasn't anything special, but it was okay. It did the job, I guess. So that wraps up our Raw notes as we move on to the SmackDown show. So the SmackDown show opened up with a Rowan promo. And something that's funny because Rowan kind of is growing on me. He, before, kind of was a iffy, singles competitor. Even before, like, this promo on SmackDown, he was just kind of an iffy singles competitor. I just didn't see much for him. There wasn't much of a gimmick there, but he's kind of growing on me with this gimmick. He's not as bad of a talker as I thought he was. And definitely I'm kind of intrigued to see what they do with him. I'm a little bit scared, however, that they're teaming him up with Harper right off the bat. Here's the thing. I don't think he needs Harper. I think that Harper brings in a little bit more flavor. But I think they should both be showcased as singles competitors for a while instead of being just stuck back together. They've had a lot of changes happen. They've been a team for a while. They definitely have good chemistry as a team. I kind of wanted to see what they do as singles competitors first, but I don't know what we're going to get. I really don't. Brian would come out and interrupt that promo and ask for a match, and it turned into a match. And it's funny because the match was decent. Rowan really isn't a top athlete as far as ring work. He's more of like a hard hitter, more of a slow-paced, working over his opponent more. He's not really a high flyer, just a slow-paced performer overall. Daniel Bryan's kind of in an odd place. I'm not sure if he's really turning face or if he's staying heel. There was a botch with the ropes at the end of the match where Rowan picked up Daniel Bryan and the Iron Claw, I think they're calling it now. And when he did, Bryan had his leg caught on the ropes and actually brought Bryan down into the ring where the ropes folded up over his ankle. So I hope there's no ankle issue there for Bryan. It looked fine. Rowan did win the match, and I thought that he needed it. It kind of solidified him as a character, I think. And then obviously Bryan and Reigns, they assault Bryan, Harper, and Rowan. Harper was already out there on the announce table, and what cost Bryan the match, per se. They start attacking Bryan, and Reigns comes out to help. Harper and Rowan kind of resumed with a fight between them, and ended up at the end, Daniel Bryan and Roman Reigns putting them down, sending them out of the ring, and Bryan asked, "Do you want to see us kick Rowan and Harper's, you know what?" And the crowd started chanting yes. So it was a yes movement back. I don't know. Like I said, Bryan's kind of in an odd spot for me. I don't know if he's turning face or if he's staying heel or if he's just maybe faking out Roman Reigns. I did read rumors on it, and it's funny because I was thinking kind of the same thing. I wonder if it might be time for Roman Reigns to turn heel. That could be a twist. Bryan turns face, Roman Reigns turns heel. I'm interested to see where they're going with that. I think it's time for a Roman Reigns heel. However, I don't think the WWE is ready for that. Roman Reigns answers a lot of Make-A-Wish. He's the John Cena now of the modern era. And that's why John Cena didn't turn heel for a long time. He says, if there was somebody willing to take my spot in that for these kids, then he would have turned heel a long time ago. But there just isn't. And I think that there is now, and that's Roman Reigns, and I would be very surprised to see him turn heel. But if he does, I think it's needed. I think he'd make a good heel. I think he'd make a better heel than a face, honestly. I don't think he can talk that well as a face, but I think his actions will speak better as a heel than they do as a face. But it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Of course, then we move on to the Kofi interview. Now, this is funny because I don't know where I sit with this. Brock Lesnar is challenging Kofi Kingston on the opening season premiere on Fox for SmackDown Live. Or SmackDown, I don't know if they're calling it SmackDown Live anymore. But I'm not sure how I think about that. When they brought Brock Lesnar back out to challenge for the WWE Championship, I really did not like it. I didn't. It depends on what they do with it as to the caliber in which I don't like it. It was time to move Brock Lesnar away from the championship scene, I think. He beat Seth Rollins with the briefcase, and then Seth Rollins came back and won the title back. I don't want to see him bury Kofi Kingston, and I don't want to see him with the WWE Championship. I just think that SmackDown is going into a spot where they could really use somebody carrying the championship that is believable to lose it. Maybe Brock Lesnar is that person now, but not really. Not without breaking down the character that was Seth Rollins, Not without making Seth Rollins look like, oh, well, anybody can beat Brock Lesnar now. I just think that it's time for the other people to get a shot at the title. I think it's time for Kevin Owens to get a run at a title again. I just think they have a lot of talent on Friday Night SmackDown that they just need to utilize, and not Brock Lesnar. Could this be just a ploy to bring more people over to the premiere and Lesnar's not really going to win? Sure, and I could see them doing that. I just don't think Brock Lesnar's as big of a draw anymore as he used to be. I think, honestly, the NXT scene is more of a draw for people than Brock Lesnar is now. People are done with the big guys, the big muscly guys, the Hulk Hogans, the stuff like that. They want to see these other guys, the Finn Balors, the Alis. They want to see these guys compete, and SmackDown's a perfect place for that. I mean, it used to be, like Daniel Bryan used to say, the land of opportunity, and I think that would be cool to have that again. NXT is kind of the land of opportunity now. And we'll get onto that during the NXT segment a little bit more. But, the Kofi Kingston interview, he's not ready to give it up. But will he? That's the big question. Will Brock Lesnar defeat Kofi Kingston on the SmackDown premiere on Fox? I guess we're going to have to find out. The next matchup on SmackDown was Chad Gable versus Mike Kanellis. Now, Gable looked really good in the ring once again and reminded me a lot of Kurt Angle once again. And like I said, maybe too much so. Maybe he needs a little bit of his own personality in the match. It was a short match anyway, and it didn't do Gable any favors to be short like that. It just didn't, he didn't get to showcase himself a lot. It was just a quick win. I mean, if wins are all that matters to push a character now, I mean, okay. But really, just what needs to be showcased more, I think, is just a superstar's athletic capability and just how he can perform in the ring. And, kind of not even looking at Mike Kanellis in this match, but Mike Kanellis could be a huge competitor too. Could be more of an asset than what they're using him as. Is another wasted talent like EC3 kind of. And once again, I think they could use these guys better. Just use them more. Mike Kanellis was a big guy on the indie scene. And I just wish they would use some of these guys more instead of just being squash matches for other people, especially like Gable. Not saying that Gable's a bad competitor, just he shouldn't be in a squash match. He should be in a match where he can showcase his ability more, like kind of what they did in the King of the Ring tournament. But pretty much that's the only thing we can talk about on that. During Gable's celebration, Elias interrupts him with a song. That's pretty much all I can add on that. Hadn't seen Elias in a couple of weeks, so be interesting to see what they do with him. The next match, Charlotte and Carmella teamed up to take on Bayley and Sasha, once again pushing the Bayley and Sasha thing. Carmella was at least the 24/7 champion. She beat R-Truth on Raw, I believe, for the title. And it wasn't a bad matchup. Carmella looked really good in the ring. However, she does get pinned by Sasha at the end of the match. Sasha and Bayley pick up the win once again. But here's the funny part in that. And I don't think I'm the only one reporting on this, but it could be. The 24/7 title is just that, 24/7. So if Carmella gets pinned in the tag team match, shouldn't that mean that Sasha's the 24/7 champion? I mean, I get the matchup was a tag team match, but if it's a 24/7 title, doesn't it make sense that she loses the title if she got pinned? I'm not sure. Let me know what you guys' opinion on that. I'm kind of interested. But that's just kind of where my thought was. Becky makes a surprise visit targeting Sasha and Bayley, and pretty much that wrapped up that segment. And we move on to the next matchup. The next match was Shinsuke Nakamura versus Ali. And I got to say that this match was one of the best on the night, I thought. Irish whip to the post looked awesome. For those of you that didn't see it, you might want to go back and check it out. It was a pretty good match. Ali is just a phenomenal athlete. Shinsuke Nakamura makes fantastic multiple heel unorthodox spots. There was one German suplex, for example, that he did like through the ropes. I'm not even sure how to like explain that. It was like through the middle and the bottom rope, and he did like a German suplex through it. It was kind of awesome. But they did a great job making Ali look strong, I thought, and a phenomenal heel finish for Shinsuke Nakamura. For those of you that didn't see the match, go back and check it out. You definitely missed a good match. And the next match on the night, I have the New Day versus the B Team. And I thought there was a decent match. The New Day picked up the win. I really don't have anything else to add on to that. It made the New Day look good. The B Team kind of, they're always an eh. I think it all just matters on who they're going against and how they book them. And I think that they're booking them right now as just a tool to push other tag teams. That's kind of what it seemed like to me. Finally, to cap off the SmackDown portion of this podcast, we had Shane McMahon and the Kevin Owens segment for the lawsuit. And there's not really much to add on here. Shane McMahon gave him two options that Kevin Owens obviously was not happy with. And Kevin Owens obviously told him that you must think that I'm an idiot, basically. And then challenged him to a ladder match where they hang the lawsuit on the line, or Shane McMahon's career. I'm not really sure, which is on the line. I think it's Shane McMahon's career. But I'm not sure what they're going to do with that. Is Shane McMahon going to be done on TV? I'm not sure. But yeah, decent segment. Going to be a ladder match in the future. I'm kind of looking forward to the draft when it comes to Raw and SmackDown. And I'm kind of looking forward to exclusive shows for superstars. This crossing between shows just, I don't think, works. However, I'm kind of intrigued, too, to see what are they going to do with NXT when it comes to the draft. Are superstars going to be able to be drafted to NXT, or is NXT superstars going to be able to be drafted to the main roster? Not sure how that's going to work, but I'm kind of intrigued to find out. But I am excited to see that the draft is coming back, and really looking forward to it. And now it's time to move on to the NXT portion of the podcast. Of course, the first portion of this NXT podcast was from the USA Network. And here's a funny thing. I don't think NXT hit the mark this week either. I think that it was just a rough week for people. And I'll explain as we go down through these notes somewhat too. But NXT last week I thought really hit the mark. I thought it was really a great show and really a good way to showcase this NXT brand on live TV. But I don't think they hit the mark as well as I was hoping they would this week. And maybe it's just a lull and they'll get right back into it. NXT is usually really great. But it was one thing that I was worried about with them coming to main TV is NXT going to be as good as what it was on the WWE Network? I don't know. We're going to have to find out in coming weeks. But it started off with a great match with Keith Lee versus Dominik Dijakovic. I think I'm saying that right. Phenomenal matchup. Two great big guys put on an awesome matchup. There was, however, a big botch with Keith Lee trying to go for a suplex and ended up from the sleeper hold. And they kind of faked a roll-up type deal. It was just a wicked botch in the matchup, and they didn't really play it off good because they kind of rolled them up into the ropes, and obviously the ref couldn't count because they were in the ropes. There was an awesome avalanche Canadian Destroyer. Awesome Canadian Destroyer. But ultimately it ended up with Keith Lee hitting the finisher and picking up the win in that first matchup. The next matchup was Dakota Kai making her big return against Tainara. And I thought that match was an impressive return. I thought it was a very good match. Not too much to report on it. It was kind of a short-lived match, but it really made Dakota Kai look pretty good. And good return match for her. And, I think that was all the purpose that it served right there. The street fight between Killian Dane and Matt Riddle. I'm not a huge fan of Matt Riddle, and I hope I don't get a lot of flack for that. I'm just not. But however, I thought in this match, I thought he did pretty well. I thought he actually showcased some good wrestling ability in that match. The match was a street fight, but it started in the beginning as a normal wrestling match, or at least it felt like it. The match then turned a little violent. It was kind of sloppy in spots. However, there was an instant where they went out into the crowd and got slammed through boards out there. There was a table spot, which I thought was okay. And obviously the winner picks up a title shot against Adam Cole. So, here's the tough part. They did the Killian Dane, Matt Riddle matchup for the NXT title opportunity, but I just thought there was more people that I could see going for the NXT title before Matt Riddle or Killian Dane. Matt Riddle, however, did pick up the win, so he will be facing Adam Cole. Adam Cole did come out after the matchup, got right in his face, and he ended up getting in the bro mission, and that was how that segment pretty much ended. So not a phenomenal matchup, but not a bad one either, and that capped off the USA portion of the NXT show. Kicking off the NXT on the WWE Network, they kicked it off with Rhea Ripley versus Caden Carter. And now this is funny because I thought that they hit the nail right on the head when it came to this matchup. Caden Carter looked very good in the matchup. Some high-flying springboard moves in there that I really loved. One in particular was taking down Ripley and connecting with a kick to the chin right out of nowhere, which I thought was just phenomenal. And I kind of knew that Ripley was going to win the match, but it was very tasteful to give Caden that little showcase in the match to kind of build her character up too. I don't think that's the last we're going to see of Caden. I don't think it was just a squash match. I thought it was a little bit more tasteful. Thought they could have done something like that with EC3 and made Rusev look good, or just give Rusev some other opponent other than EC3 on the Raw show instead of just having him squashed. But all in all, I thought Ripley did really well, and thought it was a really good showcase for Caden as well to help build up her character. Everrise versus Lorcan and Birch. Thought it was decent tag team action. Everrise looked pretty good in the match. I don't know if they're going to be a key tag team on NXT now, but Oney Lorcan and Danny Birch picked up the win, and there's not really much more to add on to that match. Of course, there was a spot where they panned to the crowd after the tag team matchup we just talked about, and they showed Chelsea Green, which was Laurel Van Ness from the Impact days, and Deonna Purrazzo, which is a new competitor, I believe. But it was nice to see Chelsea Green there, so hopefully they're going to, and I figure by them panning to the crowd and showing them that they're going to actually get some time on the screen here right off. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with them in the future. Mendoza versus Grimes. Both have some unorthodox offense. Grimes is known for his time in Impact as well as Trevor Lee. And the match was semi-sloppy on Mendoza's part, but that's likely with him being, fairly new. Mendoza did get better late on in the match. However, Grimes picked up the win. I wasn't really invested in either one of these guys. Cameron Grimes is kind of in an odd spot. I didn't really watch Impact enough to know the Trevor Lee character too much. I knew of him there, and I saw videos on YouTube with him, and he's pretty good in the ring. And Grimes did pick up the win in that matchup, but he's kind of in a weird character position right now. I don't think he really has much of a gimmick at the moment, but hopefully soon he will. Kushida and Xango versus Imperium. This match I thought had good back and forth start to the match. Kushida, a good contributor to that. It was nice to see Fandango and Tyler Breeze in action once again. Best thing they could have done is bring them back down to NXT in my opinion. It just kind of revitalized their careers, and they were just underutilized on the main roster. I mean, they hadn't really done much on the main roster at all. So to bring them back down to kind of rebuild their characters, I think the best thing they could do is leave them down in NXT. It just seems like the better writing place for guys like that. Let me see where I am on my notes here. Imperium, I think that they're an awesome stable. They were very impressive, keeping a slower pace to the match, working over Tyler Breeze. There was a nice Tree of Woe type maneuver. If you guys missed that, go back and check it out. It was good match control on Imperium's part. A lot of Imperium in the match and not a lot of face time in the match. But I thought that was really good. Fandango looked really good. It's been a long time since we got to see Fandango do more than just get crushed by other tag teams. And Kushida and Breezango won the match. And then obviously as Kushida makes his way out of the ring, Walter attacks him. And I just think I'm really impressed with Imperium. I haven't watched NXT UK. It's just too much wrestling to try to watch and keep up with everything. But I think Imperium's going to make a really strong stable. And I'm really excited to see what they do with them in the future here in the US version of NXT. So that kind of wraps up our podcast of This Week in WWE. If you guys enjoyed this, please leave a comment down below on YouTube. Like and subscribe on YouTube as well, and hit that notification bell to keep up to date on all the content. I urge you guys to go check it out on YouTube, even if you're listening on the go. Trust me, I love to have something to listen to on the go that I'm really interested in. And let me know your guys' opinions. What do you think on my opinions on them? This doesn't come from a hateful place, definitely. I enjoy WWE. I enjoy wrestling as a whole. And I'm kind of interested to see what AEW does. The pay-per-view thing is going to be different because I'm not going to spend $60 for a pay-per-view. I don't blame them. They don't have a network like WWE does, but $10 to watch the pay-per-view, that's phenomenal. Even if you don't watch anything else, $10 for the WWE network to get all that they offer and the pay-per-view, that alone is enough. But all in all, I thought this week in WWE was, kind of lackluster, really. I don't think many of the shows really hit the mark for me to really be super excited for this coming week. They're bringing a couple legends back on Monday Night Raw for the season premiere, and I'm kind of excited to see what they're going to do just by what they're going to build for the shows on the season premieres. NXT, I hope, does back to their regular roots on putting on a really great show. But overall, this week in WWE, not a whole lot that I was overly impressed with, but I'm hoping for better stuff in the future. And so, yeah, if you're listening on this podcast instead of on YouTube, subscribe to the podcast, keep up to date on all of our newest content, and definitely on YouTube to keep up with our visual content and our custom WWE 2K19 Universe mode. We're going to be picking up Season 2 on WWE 2K20, spoiler right there, and I'm excited to continue that custom story. Thank you guys so much for watching here on the This Week in WWE podcast brought to you by the American Pride Network, and we will see you guys next week, hopefully right here doing another podcast. We'll see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much for watching.